Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 45 with Cory Strassburger. If you enjoy what you hear today, you can follow us at CG Pro in our Facebook group and at becomecgpro.com. So, today it gives me great pleasure to introduce somebody who you're probably used to seeing differently, but Cory is the creator of Blue in Xanadu from his popular YouTube channel. He's also a great history in visual effects, which many people might not know him for, but has a great history in visual effects going back quite a long time, and has won some Emmys and Cannes, Golden Lions, and things like that for his work in that industry. Cory, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight.
Cool. Well, thanks for the introduction. It's awesome to be here. I always dig what you guys have been up to, and it's just fun to chat about this stuff. So thanks for having me.
You bet. Yeah, thanks for being here. And welcome back to LA as well. Good to have you in town.
Yeah, it's nice to be back. Thanks.
You bet. So, for those who don't know too much about you, how did you get started in creating content films? Is this something that started when you were a kid? Did you start experimenting early on? How did you get into this whole thing?
I mean, for sure. I think like a lot of people, I grew up watching TV and movies and was super inspired by a lot of special effects movies as a kid. Originally, I was not a horror movie fan at all. Like I didn't like horror movies, but I loved prosthetics. I loved all the makeup effects. It was just fascinating to me as part of the movie making process. So I originally got into like doing liquid latex masks and stuff like that. And then when stuff became digital, like Terminator 2, I think was the liquid metal guy. When I saw that, and when I saw like the Abyss, the liquid kind of like character that came up, I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then as I started to look into who was doing this stuff, like ILM and back then Rhythm and Hues and all these companies, I was just like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I got like an early Macintosh back in the day, an early 3D program called Electric Image. And, I couldn't afford any of this stuff. I was literally like going to the local art store and like with my box of floppy disks, like copying all this software because I just couldn't afford it at the time. But so I kind of learned it all at that stage, and I just wanted to do special effects. And then eventually, I when I turned 20, I moved out to LA from Florida where there wasn't much going on. And then I kind of just got my first job at a VFX house. And oddly enough, I really wanted to work at one of the big studios. At that time, it was Rhythm and Hues Digital Domain, at least in LA. And none of them, I put my resumes out everywhere. None of them would hire me or even give me an interview. So I ended up working at this small boutique place called View Studio. And the beauty that I didn't realize is that was a blessing because I got to learn on all the equipment there. Like in a big studio, you're kind of like, okay, you're going to be a lighter, you're going to be in a cubicle, and you're going to do this. I had the freedom to learn like Inferno, Flame, compositing boxes. Henry's and Harry's back then were like big, expensive compositing boxes. They bought me before Maya was Power Animator. And so I was able to do it all, which I loved. And so I really thrived at that place more than I think I could have anywhere else. And just learned every aspect of it. And then that just kind of like led me through, I don't know, a decade of working on TV shows and movies, basically at that studio.
Cool. Yeah, similar path to me. In fact, I went and worked in a small studio in the beginning, and I felt like it was really great to get all of that exposure to all those different tools and having to find the solution when you've got less resources. It makes you very resourceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was definitely some really fun memories. Met a lot of really cool people, and you're still in the special effects scene. So like I got to go to all the bigger studios, and I met people that worked at all these studios. So it was just like a cool world to be in at that time, especially.
What did you study to do it? To teach
No,
yourself?
I just kind of taught myself. I mean, in high school, when everybody else in my neighborhood, anyway, my school, were out like driving their cars and going to the mall and stuff, I was like the geeky kid at home, like on the computer, just learning the software, doing stuff, you know.
Good
So
science kid.
I was kind of self-taught mostly. I wanted to go to school. The only school back then, I don't know if you know Ringling,
Yeah,
School of Arts in Tampa, or not, Sarasota, I guess. I wanted to go there because that was like the only school at the time that had like animation, like computer animation courses, and that was the beginning of that. But the opportunity to go out to LA kind of just sprung up, and so I just jumped on it, and then more or less learned as I went. It's funny, when I first started at the studio, desktop animation didn't really exist. Like, it was all SGI, high end equipment, high end software. The Mac stuff, the PC stuff was not in the profession of VFX at that point. So I was like, early on, I shifted from SGI to PC and stuff like that when it came. But most of the companies didn't know what to do with me, or why they didn't hire me. And then even the place that did was like, well, we don't have Macs, we don't have PCs, but we'll get you, other stuff that people are using. So that was kind of an interesting period of time, I think, in the VFX world, of going from big expensive stuff more to like affordable desktop gear.
right. Yeah, it was quite the barrier to entry back then, of having only being able to do it on a machine that cost whatever they were, 100, 200,000 plus. And then the
Hmm.
software Maya, if you're using Maya or Power Anime, I remember Maya at the beginning being $30,000. So you
Yep.
add all that up, and it's
Yep.
lucky. It was kind of like Flame in that sense, in 3D at the beginning. So it's
Yeah.
tough. It was tough to get exposure to it, and it's before like people found copies of software and had more affordable machines.
Yep. Yep. Those are the days.
Yeah. So, and you did some time on Flame as well?
Yeah, they had a flame that they eventually turned into an inferno, and I just was doing it on my off time, kind of just learning it. It was very alien to me, that sort of interface and that way of working, because I was doing stuff in After Effects, basically all my compositing. But I was just sponge for things, and the real time nature of it was pretty damn exciting at that point,
Mm,
versus like the slowness of being on After Effects. So yeah, I would just spend my nights kind of working on it, and then eventually I got good enough that they were booking me out on it, because it was way more. They made way more money on that. But and I kind of just started to bounce between the two, because I liked it. It was really fun, but it wasn't like, if I was doing something that involved 3D. Eventually, I stuck my 3D system in the Inferno Bay so that I could do some 3D stuff, bring it into
mm.
the Inferno, and I think, and I was really the only one doing 3D at that studio. So like, I just got busier doing that than Inferno type work, if that makes sense. But yeah, I was probably like a couple years on and off doing Inferno, not quite day to day, but almost.
And for anyone who doesn't remember those things, talking about compositing and well, still used. Flame is still used a bit, and was real time, as you said. And it's interesting seeing how that's gone. It's got that it went back to being kind of slow and having to render things, and now we're all in 3D in real time, which never seemed possible. Now there we are in 3D in real time.
Yeah.
2D needs to catch up.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. I think it just kind of it's like an afterthought at this point.
Yeah, that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see where it goes. So 3D was more of a calling for you. 3D was more exciting than 2D.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I still love 3D. I mean, even back then, it's like creating characters, creating worlds. All that fascinated me as a kid with sci-fi. Like, I'm drawn to all those sort of stories that take you into other worlds, Star Wars, Star Trek. And so being a 3D artist was, more indicative of building those kinds of things. And I love that stuff a lot. And I think that's kind of what brought me into real time was actually augmented reality back in 2012. A buddy of mine was like, dude, check this out. He showed me his iPad. And this was before anyone ever heard of augmented reality, or me especially. It was just not on anyone seen it, or he was a coder. He programmed this little bear where you could like track a card and you could see it with the iPad. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? You know, it's so cool. And so I was hooked on it. And I learned Unity because that was the only thing that was kind of like letting you do that stuff at that time. And I loved it. And we both kind of started together taking high-end VFX photogrammetry, which was still early in its day, and getting that into AR, because real-time Unity AR at that point was pretty lo-fi gamey feeling, but we were trying to make it high level. And so I really I fell in love with coding in Unity, you know, C#, and just the real-time nature of it was just really fun because it combined programming and visuals together. And that kind of led to VR, which then led to VR gaming, which is where I started a company with this guy in probably 2014, maybe. And then we started to do VR gaming. And in that process is where I learned how to do all the character stuff that eventually led to Blue and Xanadu, which is what I'm doing now. So it's kind of an abbreviated story of it. There's a lot more details if we wanted to get into that. But that was kind of the gist of my transition from, I guess, old school VFX into real time and then into what I'm doing now.
How you've learned a lot of things and largely self-taught as well. How have you approached it? What's like you said, some of those things are quite complex and, you know, big things to bite off.
Mhm.
What you can't learn them necessarily all at the same time. What's your approach to learning new skills, if you like?
I think that, and this is something that I tell people when they're starting to get into this, like, how do I do what you're doing? You know, for me, I'm very like, I orient myself to something that I want to make really bad. Like, I get to a point where I want to make something really bad, and then I just figure out what it takes to make that thing. And in contrast, I feel like I have friends that they just love learning stuff. And I love learning stuff too, don't get me wrong. But they just love learning stuff because they want to have this skill set. They want to have that skill set. They want to have that skill set. So they're like going through tutorials and they're learning things, but they don't really have an objective per se, other than just to have that knowledge. And that's 100% fine. But I think the thing that accelerates my learning and ability to do all these other things is that I'll fixate on something that I want to make, and then I'll just learn what I need to make that thing. I won't go
Yeah.
off on tangents of like, oh, here's this whole big engine. I'm just like, okay, I want to make this thing and I want to see it do this. So I'll go and learn how to make that thing. And then I want to see, so it's very project oriented. So I always tell people, just like, the best thing you can do from my standpoint, the style that I adapted to was like, make up a project. Like, even with all this early mocap stuff, I just wanted to see our baby characters for a game come to life in some way. And it's not really a project. That's more just like, can this technology work? But then as I started thinking, can I do this for YouTube really fast and make a series out of it? I took this Baby Yoda stuff, because it was like, okay, I don't have to worry about story. I can just take these characters, they're already built, I can modify them, and I can try to come up with a story and see how fast I can do it. And that's what I learned how to do. I learned a process, basically, which I still use to this day, mostly on Xanadu on those projects. And I didn't know that what Xanadu was going to be exactly, but I was just thinking, can I make stuff fast? Uh, you know, with this technology, with the mocap stuff, and just download marketplace assets, because I knew all the things that were going to slow me down, like modeling characters and
Mm.
stuff. And it proved to me, I was like, okay, this is working. So then Xanadu kind of came about more practically for me. Um, but yeah, I think it's just like being project oriented is how I do it. And, you know, I learned to program. This is a funny thing too, like way back, I don't know how long ago, it would have been 10 years ago or something like that. I needed an organizer program, just a organ, like Evernote and all those cheesy things. And I like to organize stuff in a certain way. I couldn't find anything that did it. So I was like, I wonder how hard it is to program, And I realized it was really hard. So I was like, okay, if not, forget that. But then there was this program called Real Basic, where it's like simple programming that I could read. And I'm like, I can kind of understand that. So I started to learn that to make this simple organizer that turned into a year-long weekend project of learning how to write code. By the end, I was actually pretty good at coding. In the beginning, this first 6 months was terrible, but I just wanted to make this thing really bad. And that's what drove the learning part of it. But I took that knowledge was so critical because when Unity came around, I could adapt to C# really fast. And that became a way for me to go, okay, I don't have to rely on anybody. I can code, I can do the visuals, and I can make stuff. And it was in that process of like thinking of an idea and making stuff that in real time that I really, really fell in love with. And then, that just kind of evolved, I guess, into the game. And then the game for me was less, I'm not a gamer, so it wasn't really like I was kind of creating partially the game, but because I wanted to build the cinematic world around it. And my partner Krima, who was doing all the coding and the game mechanics, he's a hardcore gamer. He was like, okay, well, this is how we'll make the mechanics work for this storyline. And then he was off doing that, and I was off sort of like doing all the story, the character stuff, and the animations for the game and whatnot. But yeah, that was kind of like the VR is what got me into Unreal Engine actually from Unity. That's what I was trying to get to, but I forgot my train of thought.
It's quite a journey. Yeah, I'm not surprised. You see, essentially, what I'm hearing is having a project, having a focus, having something to pull you towards it, and pull you through those things that you need to learn is the motivating factor for you, rather than learning a bunch of things that you should learn or think you should learn. You have a goal, and it tells you what you need to know, and then you go and work those things out.
Yeah, I would say that's a strong factor in the way that I kind of went along the way, and still do. Like even with like blockchain, some of this new stuff that's out, that's kind of crazy. And how does that integrate? Like I come from a place where like, oh, in Xanadu, people could connect to the content in this way. And so I'll try to figure out how to use that technology to make that idea work versus going, okay, here's this cool thing. What can I plug into it? So it's just inspiration, I guess. It's like things inspire me to want to I think it up or make it up, or I see somebody else doing it and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And then I guess the key is just not getting caught in the weeds of like, oh, it's so easy to be like, oh, you're learning the program and you're going off on these tangents versus making the thing so that you actually end up with the thing that you're happy with, not because it's a great piece of end result. You're learning along the way, but you're happy with what you've learned, and you hopefully are inspired to make the next step. Like, oh, I'm going to make this better now that I know how to do this, this, and this. And you're fostering the ideas rather than like the technology itself, I guess.
Right. Yeah, sometimes the technology can get in the way and you can get too obsessed with the tool itself and forget that you're learning it for an outcome. And yeah, I think that's really cool for people to hear. Did you end up making the project management system?
Oh, I did. I actually got
Right.
I got some pretty good props in Macworld. It was a Mac program. Obviously, I was a Mac
Right.
guy back then, and so it got like 4 mice on Macworld. They reviewed it. It was a really polished, like solid piece of software.
You
That then,
released it as well.
yeah, I released it.
Wow.
I didn't make anything on it because it was just like it suddenly became. It was like, of course, I'm going to release it. It's really cool. I polished it way more than I needed to for myself. I released it, and then I realized I'm like, oh man, this takes like upkeep. I got to respond to people's emails, and then I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. So then I sold it to a company that basically kind of like it just died in their hands essentially. And probably because the early coding, the foundation coding is fucking terrible, and then it got really good at the end. So them going into, and it was a massive program by the end. So they probably were like, okay, we can't, this is like unupdatable, or we can only do little minor updates versus any major thing. And they probably just couldn't do anything with it for that reason. I don't know. But essentially it just kind of died out. I used it up until the Macs changed their processing to the new architecture, and then it wouldn't run anymore. So then I had to switch over to some, whatever it was at the time, probably Evernote or something like that.
I was going to ask you what that became, because there's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, and is how you, 'cause you're quite a prolific creator, and to be that, you have to. I think there's this kind of myth that creative people are completely they're completely disorganized, and their lives are falling apart in the background. And often I find it's the complete opposite, that they're actually very, very organized, very focused, and to be able to get through that much work, you kind of have to be. You have to be your own producer. You have to stay on track. You have to complete things. So, what does that look like now for you, since the death of your own tool which you made?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right in that you can't, in my opinion, you have to be super optimal with everything that you're doing. Like my physical life might be a little bit messy, but in my digital world, it's super organized. My projects are super organized. My Maya scenes are super organized. Like if I can't have a mess in anything that I'm doing, because yeah, it deters you from making changes. It deters you from all kinds of things. So on that front, organizing's always been a big thing for me, and apps that do it have always been big things. Nowadays, I'm using Notion,
Oh,
probably as
cool.
my core organizing program. I'd say my all-time favorite that I still use to this day is a program called Curio.
Mm,
I think it's Mac only. It's from a company called Zengobi, and it's basically just like an idea space. You can lay out a lot of things in just random ways, or it can be pretty well organized. But all my projects get heavily, or I use that software heavily for just like creative ideation, all the way to there's, you can throw in a spreadsheet type thing, simple stuff like that. But it's a pretty well evolved program. I love it to death. I haven't been using it that much lately, honestly, because been I haven't been doing that type of creative work. But so Notion tends to be my go-to at this point. I've used Shotgun on the game project, which is really a lot more involved and team oriented, and I've had some, some success with that. As one of those things too, where I think we overdid it. It's one of those technology things. You're like, oh my god, I could organize it in all these ways and do all this stuff, and you tend to do it because it's fun. And then over time, you realize that this is a huge waste of time, because you
yeah.
only really need this, and you built this.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a sledgehammer to crack a walnut sometimes. It's great if you've got hundreds of artists and thousands of shots, though. It's almost like necessary in that kind of space
yeah.
to have something that elaborate.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it was great to have 100% for us, even as a small team. There's probably maybe 12 people at any one, at the maximum amount of time working out of it. Um, but even in it, we could have gotten away with a simplified version of what we had set up versus, and I say we, but it was really me doing all this stuff because it was just cool. And it's like, I like seeing stuff organized in certain ways, but you learn as you go, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, I used to be a software engineer, and in the digital space, learned to be really organized with code, learned to do the same thing in 3D scenes. Had that kind of smacked into me at the beginning of my career, when my boss would take my scenes and tell me what he thought about them if they weren't organized. So
That's good. Good for him. It's good
yeah,
lessons to learn.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I owe him a lot, Sean Elliott. Thank you. Um, but yeah, really, really cool to hear about, because I do think that is a myth that's worth busting. That creative people are just wildly creating where however and wherever they feel like, but it's usually what I see is the complete opposite of that. So I think it's really good for people to know that you've got to have your stuff together, and you've got to accomplish something big. You need organization, and you also need multiple people usually, and that creates a whole other level of organization when you're trying to
Mhm.
help other people be organized at some point too.
100%. Yeah, that was a lesson I learned on the game because even on Xanadu and prior to that, when it was just me and Akrima doing all this stuff, I didn't have to organize anything for anybody. It was all just like in my head or organized my way. But then suddenly you're like interfacing with people and you're like, Jesus, I got to get all of this stuff out of my head into some form. And actually, one of the things that really benefited me in my career was there was a company. So this View Studio, the VFX company I was working at, they downsized when things were kind of changing in that landscape, and a motion graphics company called Troika came into the same building, and
I
so I
know
ended
them,
up,
yeah.
Troika. So I started
Yeah.
working on stuff. They were just hiring my company, the company I work for, to do 3D animation. So I ended up working with them, and then when the VFX company left, I was still freelancing, and they gave me an office space at Troika. And so I was surrounded by designers, and they were doing presentations. They were doing all the graphics for ABC, NBC, ESPN, like all those motion graphics back in the day. And I ended up learning a lot about how to present work ideas to other people. For them, it was mostly clients, but even internally, they would create these decks basically. And so I still, to this day, one of the things I really got out of that is I learned how to design. I learned how to think from a designer standpoint because again, I saw these artists making stuff that was so good. And I'm like, how the heck are they doing that? Like, how are they just sitting down? Like, I could get stuff to look okay if I just go, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks less, this sucks less. Like, it was a long process for me to get something that I liked. And then I started to realize, and this is one of the downsides of not going to school, because you go to school, you learn about design, or depending on what kind of school you go to. Where these guys went to school, they learned all these principles that I just was like fumbling around trying to figure out. But eventually, by being there and asking and learning, and I learned how to design, or I had to look how to look at things from a designer standpoint. So that's served me really well because I love like branding. I love the parts of Xanadu in the game that are just like nice designs to present your work, but also just building decks that show that communicate an idea. So when I'm working on like this Xanadu episode, which is the first one that is more than just me. Like all the episodes up to this point have just been me doing everything, but now I'm working on a bigger one that I got funding for. And I'll go in and build really nice decks and communicate the ideas for all the various things. These are what the characters need to be like, the design for the concept artists. These are what the buildings need to be like. I've been using Midjourney a lot to kind of fill in blanks or communicate ideas. But I think it's really important, once you're not just you and you're working with other people, to learn how to communicate visually, and through decks have been kind of the primary way I've been doing it from what I've learned. But I don't know how else I would get the stuff that I want done without that process. So it's become like, I guess for art directors and people like that, that's an everyday thing. But for actual VFX people who are just on the box working, it's not as necessary unless you're trying to communicate something that's not just a conversation, where you need references, you need to think about the mood and the right words, like things that you can leave with the artists so that they know how to create as close to what you're trying to achieve as possible.
Right. Yeah, it's very hard to describe things like that. Always found, but visually being able to communicate as artists is really important. I'll try say you saying troikas have brought up some great memories for me. Actually, part of a group I used to be a part of called the Sancho Plan did an animation years ago in the 90s. It was a flash animation. You could trigger these little Japanese characters that were drummers, and they bang the drum, and you could play it on your browser, and it kind of flew around the internet for a while, and then we ended up making it into a big show, and it was a
Hmm.
performance and an installation. But yeah, those guys were the character designers for that, and just I always loved those characters. When we will try and drop a link into this a bit later, but
Yeah, I want to check that out. It sounds cool.
Yeah, it was super fun. I got into this through being a VJ and doing visuals, and it kind of evolved in through a creative project like that, and then I went into the visual effects world, um,
Mm.
kind of the other way around, I guess. But yeah, there's a question that's come in from the audience that's kind of related to what you're talking about. Somebody's asking about how do you find people to collaborate with? I think this person's saying that they know they want to do everything by themselves, but they know that that will take forever if they do it. How do you connect with people to collaborate?
It's tough. I put a lot of time into it for obvious reasons, but you don't always get what you hope for. Sometimes you do. I'd say when I started to work on Bebylon, that was when I first started to have to find people to work with. And all I did at that time is I went on to ArtStation and I went just bookmarked every artist that I thought, like, I would have a specific task in mind. I need a concept artist for environments, right? It's pretty obvious. So I'd go through, make a whole list of people, and then I would just reach out to them on ArtStation. Generally, the top 20 people that I really, really want, when I see their work, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta get that person. None of them worked out or even responded. And then so then you're into that second, for me anyway, I get to the second pool of people, and it's been a little bit of a crapshoot. And I think I've gotten lucky because I've found a few artists that way that are, to me, legends in the end. Like once they started working on my stuff, and they were just like, they couldn't have been better. So in that way, I've gotten maybe lucky on that front. And so I just find them that way, and then you just start working with them. I've done a lot of like, let's just work for a week or two, see how it goes, and if it's working, we keep going. If it's not, then we don't. That's just kind of a policy I do in general. So I ended up putting together a pretty good team for that way for Bebylon. And it's the same process. Like if I need, like suddenly, oh, we got these vehicles, I would go on to, there's a couple sites of just vehicle designers, that like people that went to industrial design school and all that. And I wanted that level of like thinking behind the vehicles for the game. So I did the same thing, but on a different type of site. I got a few people. I I sent out like a test thing. A couple people didn't do great. Like they came back, I didn't like it. One guy did really amazing, and I'm like, you're the guy. And so he basically designed all the vehicles for the game. And nowadays with Xanadu, with this new episode, I've kind of gotten lucky with some people. The concept artist has been a rough ride, like trying to get, like, all the people I used to work with were all busy and couldn't work on this project. And so I went through it took months to kind of get somebody, a few people, to do the artwork for that. And they turned out to be really good. But it was a lot longer of a road. I didn't just slip right in and find somebody easily. It was tough because I had to like let go a bunch of people and um, kind of do that thing. But it's a tough thing, honestly. I think that's what's been working for me. You guys actually have helped a bit in that front. You sent me some people to reach out to for this next stage of things that I'm working on.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'm always, that's always something I'm trying to figure out myself too, is there a better way of finding those types of people, the people that you need? And there's always schedule conflicts. It just may be the nature of the beast.
It's tough. Yeah, good people are busy because they're good. That's always
Exactly.
the main thing.
Exactly.
You got to catch them at the right moment. Catch people who are great just coming out of school. That's always a good one because they haven't got snapped up yet. But then holding on to them and getting them again, and yeah, it's difficult for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely look for those that are, especially if I don't have a huge budget, like those that are talented, just coming out of school. But I'm learning, like, there's also another 20 people like me trying to look for those people too. And
Mm.
so it's like you're lucky if you're able to get them right in the nick of time before they get snatched up by Blizzard or somebody. Um, but yeah, yeah.
How about if you had no budget? Say you're an independent creator and you want to team up with some other people. I did that, but a long time ago. And we were self-funding essentially. It was kind of sweat sweat equity into a thing, if you like. Any advice for people who are creating, want to create something big and trying to attract people in other
Yeah.
ways?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let me just do a quick check and see if it's still up. This is going way back. I still pay the domain, so it should be okay. So there was it's pretty broken HTML. There was a project called Sense of Peso that I did with a buddy of mine way back in the day, and it was a free. We had no budget, and it was basically like a music video, but it was like greens. The idea was that they'd be on green screen, and we do all this big visual effects, world building stuff. So if you go to sensapeso.com, basically how I had a whole amazing crew of people. This is a little bit different because it was mostly a crew of like filmmaker, like, cinematographer and gaffers and stuff. But I got a huge crew, a huge green screen stage for free for several days, and then everything, all the artists that came to work on it afterwards worked on it for free. And the thing that got that to happen was, if you go to sensapeso.com, I
How do you
created
spell it?
SENZAPESO.
Thank you.
I think that the
Yep.
home page is a little missing because this is literally ancient. So, but if you start clicking on the tabs above, there's like about. So I made this. This again goes back to kind of like when I was learning to build decks and how to communicate ideas. I basically made this website where it is like, here's the overview of the story. Here's a bunch of just cool artwork associated with it, stuff I was just pulling off the internet. So I kind of told the whole story about it. I gave references to what the lighting is going to look like. I typed out what the design language was going to look like, what the characters could look like. I did a couple little tests in Maya, or a test in Maya, just to show this sort of surreal world. And then just based on that, it kind of spread in a way I didn't expect, like wildfire. Like, I showed it to a few people that I was trying to get to help me, and they showed it to a few people. And then suddenly they're like, oh, talk to this person. I send them the website, and they looked at it and they're like, oh my God, this looks really cool.
Mm.
I want to be a part of this. And when like, the cinematographer was like a known Hollywood guy who was working for free just because he thought that this was cool. And the guy, you get a couple crew people and they started doing it. And it was the same with the 3D guys. Like, I got some pretty talented Maya people, and it was like somebody was like, oh, so and so just got out of school, he might be able to help, or I'll send them the link. And they saw the link and they're like, oh my God, this is really cool, how can I be a part of this? So I would say, like, really presenting the idea in a way that's appealing to people who are talented and like to create stuff. And that's probably, in my experience, been the strongest way to do that. It's essentially how you get funding for stuff also, right? You got to build a deck, you got to
Yep.
present the idea, and it's usually not something you can just whip up. Like, I think if you're just trying to whip something together, it'd be really hard. So if you put a lot of time into the idea and how you present it, I think you'll get that back in terms of people's response to it, and people wanting to be a part of it. And nowadays you have social media that you can just tweet these things out, and whereas back then, social media wasn't such a way
Distribution.
to distribute the idea.
Yeah, I remember sending DVDs to all the companies I wanted to work for. There was like a whole different ball game. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Really, really great advice. I think it's just awesome to hear what your process has been and how you've gone through these things and how you've put these things together, how you've got groups of people together, because they're all sometimes I think when you're an individual creator, it can be kind of daunting to think of how do you do something big. And the person who asked the question, saying that they kind of know they can't do it all themselves, but yet what do you do? And it's great to hear that there's things you can do with no money. There's things you can do with different amounts of money. And what I hear from you is a lot of it comes down to inspiring people and creating something to inspire people to want to work with you one way or the other, whether you have money or not.
Yeah, I'd say that's hitting the nail on the head, because I kind of put myself in the other person's shoe, right? Like, I see stuff that I'd be like, oh my God, I would want to be a part of this if I wasn't neck deep in my own thing. And then I look at what inspired me, And usually it's the same kind of thing. Somebody put a lot of time and effort into creating something that's got some depth to it, and it's interesting, and it's not just like, hey, I want to build a metaverse, or hey, I want to do a thing. It's got to have some substance to it. But if you have that substance in your head and you want to make it and you can communicate it in an inspirational way, then you're just going to attract people that are drawn to wanting to do that. And it's, I think that's a definitely a good way to look at it.
Where did the idea for Blue come from?
Blue was kind of a slow brew, if you will. When I was doing the baby game, or Bebylon was a game that I was working on for a long time, and it's basically immortal babies battling each other in this arena in the future. And there's a lot of really amazing deep story involved in that project, which I won't get into with you guys. But that was where I learned, like, I wanted to bring those characters to life. And once I figured out the iPhone thing and the XN suit, I was just fell in love with that process. Like just becoming a baby. These babies were pretty wild. I mean, they were old. Their minds were old, meaning they grew. They were like 30 or 40 years old, but their bodies didn't grow. So they have this big ego in this little body and all this swagger. And so embodying these characters, thinking like, okay, what is one of them was called Maniacal. He has this mohawk. You're puppeting this guy, and it brings out this sort of inner wild child inside you, or at least it did for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. This character is so fun. And so I just fell in love with embodying characters and doing the mocap and telling stories through these characters. And so along the way, I'm like, I don't want to be babies forever. And then I started to think, like, there's an alter ego inside me that's more specific to me and not this story world. And that's where Blue kind of came about. Like he always sort of represented this idea that I could do virtually all the things that I can't do in reality, right? Like I love space stuff. I'm not probably going to go to space in my lifetime in reality, but I can go to space as Blue. I could go on adventures, sci-fi adventures, and do stuff that I can't do as me. And so it was just this idea that was slowly brewing. And oddly enough, knowing the technology limitations with the iPhone and stuff, I didn't want Blue to be a humanoid alien. I wanted him to be like very, very out there, so that the shortcomings of the mocap wouldn't put him into the uncanny valley.
Mm.
But the artist that I hired, who I was working on for the game to do Blue, came back with Blue, the original sketch of him. I was like, damn it, he's humanoid way more than I wanted, but I love him. Like she hit the nail on the head as far as like what appealed to me. So I was like, all right, screw it. I'm just going to make him and see if I can get him to look real enough. And I thought I'm like, all right, when I got there, I thought he looked real enough so that you're just not hung up on how bad the quality is. You can kind of like believe in what he's saying and what he's doing. And so the idea was always like, yeah, I'll do this kind of vloggy thing and do an alternate reality version of me, but as this character. And then that's kind of where the idea started. And then when the game sort of came to an end, like we just couldn't, the game making's really hard, and we couldn't, after 5 years, get this thing finished. We decided to just call it quits. And that's where I was like, I had two ideas on the table. One of them was Xanadu that I was going to do after, and then I just chose Xanadu. And so that's what I started to do full time, I guess 2021 or something like that.
And how did it go how did that become your occupation essentially? How did it get to the point of being able to generate income from it and have it, because it's a creative piece, it's hard to do that and derive an income as well. How did that come together?
Well, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble because but I haven't made any real sustainable money off of Xanadu at all. And it just really came about because I was spending like savings money, and I had low overhead to begin with. So, And back then I was occasionally taking like a freelance job. So I could do a couple days or a week worth of work, and that would like last me a pretty long chunk of time. So I was essentially just double downing on that. I wanted to do this. I thought I could get it sustainable. And, um, so I was just using savings money and stuff to do it, and still am to some degree. The the beauty is that sometimes, or I've always found, like if you just get into doing something, the things you need in order to do it will come about, including money. And so
Yeah.
along the way, I've gotten some boosts where when I needed them. For example, Epic Mega Grant gave me a mega grant for Xanadu, which came at the perfect time, because that's when I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? I literally need to I go back to work, do some freelance work, and I don't want to because I'm like right in the middle of this episode. And so that just, I applied for it way back in like March or something of that year, and I didn't get it until like the end of the year or something like that. Um, and then on the next front, I was back down to the same boat. Like, oh my God, I'm like out of money. I got to get this thing sustainable. Because YouTube, it requires a certain amount of regularity, which Xanadu is not. Like originally, I was like, I'll do an episode a week based on what I learned from Baby Yoda. But the reality is, my ideas were like 3 weeks, and then the fourth episode took 2.5 months. So I was going backwards in terms of getting it profitable on YouTube, using that algorithm. So I'm going to get back into that. But the thing that really helped me this time around was this Nouns project. I'll just give you the short synopsis of
Yeah.
that. But we live in a crazy time, I think, with all this crypto and all these new ways of doing things. So this is an NFT project called Nouns. The site's nouns.wtf. And the short version is, people buy this NFT, 100% of that money goes into the treasury. And then if you own a noun, you get to vote on what that treasury money is spent on. And people submit proposals. And as long as it involves promoting the Nouns brand, it has a good chance of getting voted on. And you tell them how much money you want, right? So a friend of mine introduced me to this. I was like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. And as I got into it and I saw the community, I'm like, this is even crazier, because it's a talented group of people formulating around this thing that's very unique. And at that time when crypto was up, they had $400 million in their bank just to spend
Wow.
on projects, on proposals, nothing else. So
Wow.
I was like, okay, what if I created an episode of Xanadu that took Blue on an adventure into the Nouns world? And the Nouns at that time, the Nouns are basically like pixel characters, right? They're PFP, little pixel characters. And so in order for Blue to do that, I would have to build out that world. I'd have to design what the Nouns world would look like. I would have to take their pixel characters and turn them into the style I like, which is like Pixar style that would work well in a Xanadu rendered real-time world, use all the facial mocap stuff. And so I'm like, okay, if I do that, I'll build out all these episodes, and then I will publish all those assets, the entire Unreal project, all the scenes, everything but Blue and the Xanadu specific stuff, all the characters, all the Nouns world. I'll publish it, put it out CC0 for free, for the Nouns community to use. They could create, YouTube shows from it. They could create more content. And then the episode would kind of act as a guide. Like, this is what you can do with all these assets in real time in Unreal. And so I said, this is what I'll do. And I want $300,000 to do it. I broke down a budget for my time. If I hired a team of people to build, the world building is pretty substantial amount of like time and money, right? And that's a pretty good bargain compared to what I'm actually delivering. Like, I'm delivering like, using every cent of that, putting it into the building of all this. But they
Yeah, it's
approved
very
it.
easy. A commercial could eat that and easily for a
Oh,
20-second commercial.
totally. So this is how I learned lo-fi on Bebylon, how to do a lot with a little bit of money. So I'm applying the same thing here. And so they approved it unanimously. 2 days later, I had $300,000 worth of crypto in my crypto wallet. That was scary as shit, because suddenly you have to transfer that to your bank, and any one mess up and it's like gone. It's a new crazy world. But the beauty is that it didn't take it. I did this proposal. I should send a link to that because I did it as Blue. So Blue presented this idea, and they really resonated with that because it's like, wow, he's putting his money where his mouth is. He can actually do all this stuff. Um, and I think that went a long way to getting it approved. But the beauty is, it's like it's a not there's not like an official entity of the nouns. It's a DAO, right? So there's no central committee or hires or people that work for it. So I've been pretty well like off on my own to be able to create this world. I've definitely the community of the nouns is really awesome. So I've been communicating with them on what they like the world to look like compared to like what, like trying to blend the two aesthetics of what they want, what I want. And it's been really fun. It's been very unique in that I got this large sum of money to create. It benefits me, it benefits them, and there's a lot of freedom. I've never done a project like this, and I don't. It takes this new technology to open up these doors, and it's just thanks to my friend showing me this thing, it opened up a big door for me when I needed it because like I wanted to keep creating Xanadu. And suddenly here's a way of not only keeping on going, but now I have a budget where I can hire people again, which I kind of missed working with people. And I've met some pretty talented people in this process that have been working on this that I want to keep going with other Xanadu episodes and stuff. So it's been a really cool experience, and I'm neck deep in it right now. I wish I had some cool stuff to send to Jackie to share here, but I'm literally like a week or two away from having some renders and stuff just because of my move and everything. But I'm like maybe halfway into the project. The whole world's mostly built. The characters are all built and animatable. Just got to get them textured and into the engine. But it's going to be an awesome episode. It's a huge episode, and it's just a unique experience, So we'll see where it all pans out. I mean, there's opportunities to maybe do more stuff with the nouns down the road. All these assets will exist. I've been talking to Unreal, to Epic about using this project as kind of an educational project because it's going to be free, CC0. There'll be a lot of characters in there that are fully animatable, all set up the way I've set up Xanadu. I'm going to do tutorials on how I made the episode, how to bring these characters to life, any of the cinematic stuff. So I'm going to build a bunch of educational stuff around this as part of the proposal. And so it's just been fun and interesting and unique and kind of out of the blue as far as an opportunity goes. But I feel like more and more of those things are there if you look for them, and if you have a compelling proposal. There's a lot of money being spent or available for people to do this kind of stuff. So I've just been kind of winging it as I go and finding opportunities to keep it going. But I'm at a point now where I need to make some money. I need to make it sustainable. And that's what this year is going to be about, is kind of like putting the pedal to the metal and making a real sustainable thing that's not relying on crazy opportunities to just pop up,
Right. It's a really interesting moment in time to be able to access things like that which weren't available before. You'd have to go find a patron or an investor or a publisher or something, whether it's a game or a movie or whatever you're trying to make. So it's super cool seeing some of these things coming through, and even more interesting than I've done Kickstarters in the past, and that's another way that you can fund things with Indiegogos and Kickstarters and that kind of thing. They're very
Yeah.
hard. They're very hard to be successful in, and there's lots of work and not
Yeah.
get no guarantees with that. So it's really, but still a similar idea in a way of having the community being the investor in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the funny thing, like in this process of seeing this nouns community evolve and how it's structured, it's pretty remarkable. And it's inspired me to want to create a derivative of it. And a lot of this will be announced. You guys are all hearing this sort of like lo-fi, but a lot of this is going to come out through the episodes this year. But ultimately, I want to create like a movie studio-esque entity, similar model as the nouns, in that the people that buy into it, all that money goes into the treasury, And the proposals, it's all geared so that people who love avatars, world building, metaverse, putting these worlds together so that people can interact, do stuff like Blue, but also on a larger scale and together versus these, it's meant to fund those types of proposals. So it's like, instead of the nouns, which is, geared towards promoting their brand and their initiatives, this is going to be centered around building avatars, worlds. And so it's like engineers, storytellers, writers, 3D people can get together and have access to a large enough amount of money to make real projects, right? That's kind of the beauty of this, or the promise of it, is that you can have a substantial amount of money if it's successful, and thus you can attract really talented people, and also people that maybe not that are talented, but they don't have any other means to make stuff. It's like, hey, put in a proposal. If everybody who votes on it and it's got the right spirit or whatever, it's like, boom, here's money, go and do it. There's no oversight. There's no all this crazy stuff. And, there's negatives to all that too. Obviously, people can take the money and run, and what are you going to do? There's no way to police it and stuff like that. But that's where you got to vibe things out. That's where the proposal makes a difference, and you're investing in the person. But I just love that idea. I'd love to get more people doing the stuff that I'm doing that want to do this stuff, but they have to work. They have to do stuff. They can't just go off and build virtual characters and things, even though they can or want to. And so hopefully this will be a way to expand. And Xanadu also want to make use as a test case. So if I can get it profitable on YouTube, then it can kind of become a model for other creators to do similar things. And with AI coming out as strong as it is, with 3D modeling and all these other things, like, some of the hard stuff is just going to get easier. So you don't have to be a career in VFX like me to be able to do this stuff. You got to have some chops. And hopefully if you have some storytelling chops or good ideas, the technology is going to fill in a lot of those gaps, but still you need time. And that's where money has to come into play, at least to get it going. But that's the general idea.
It feels like the future. It's exciting. I know, being a visual effects artist too by trade, I hear a lot of fear around AI. I'm a little bit more, I think, generally of an optimist around it, and hopeful that it's going to do what you say, which is to enable more people. And what I think what we can see with the tools, even Unreal Engine, is a more accessible 3D tool than I've ever seen. It was really hard to learn Maya and Houdini and things like that to become proficient enough to make something good. But some of these tools are getting more artist friendly, and then adding that in to be able to take out all the painstaking things that we used to have to paint out by hand. And yeah, I'm with you. What are some cool things that you've seen in that space that give you this excitement around AI?
So much stuff. I mean, I'm not going to be able to name things just because my memory is, I see something and I get what it does, and I'm like, oh, that's super cool. I mean, obviously, all the Nerf modeling. You just like mid journey up a text. I want to see a futuristic motorcycle, and you see one as an image. And you're like, that's amazing. You hit a button, and then it turns into a model. Obviously, it's not usable at this stage. Like, I wouldn't use anything that's out right now because it's too lo-fi. But a year from now, like, it's the curve is happening so fast. And for me, modeling is the biggest time suck across the board. The Unreal Engine has unlocked so many amazing things. It's sped up everything and made it real time, the rendering, all the traditionally old slow things. So now when I have an idea, if I have to model something, or if I need a location, I'll try to get it on the marketplace 100% all the time. If I can't find it, I need something specific, then I got to model it. And then suddenly things take time. If I can hire people, obviously, if I have money, that helps, because then they can do that while I'm doing other stuff. But if I have to stop to model, it really slows me down. So modeling, the AI modeling, I think, is going to be huge. AI animation is coming, where, man, if I didn't have to do the mocap for every background character and all that stuff, and I needed like a city thing, and I could just direct and be like, hey, I need a group of people running because this thing blew up. and then AI could just animate those characters, absolutely, that's going to save a ton. Um, Even thinking about like performance enhancement. I've talked a bunch about this to various mocap friends and stuff, but like I can't wait to, like, I'm not a great performer and I'm learning. I love the process. I want to actually get good at it with Blue and some of the other characters that I play, but it's hard. And when you're doing everything, I like in my head, I'm trying to play Blue out. I'm trying to think about all the marks that he needs to hit, so I don't have to do a bunch of manual labor and afterwards in Unreal Engine. And then I have to make sure everything's running, the takes are going, and like there's a lot of crap to manage. So Blue's performance tends to diminish if I don't have that my utmost energy, which is rare. Sometimes I'm just tired. I'm like, so I'm going to be looking to AI to like slide Blue's performance, like where he's kind of dead and I have to kind of like perk him up a little bit, just make it better.
An enthusiasm slider.
Enthusiasm slider. Just make better. I don't want things to be unauthentic in a sense. I don't want AI to kind of like do Blue, because that's what's the point then? Like I want to be Blue. I want to express myself through Blue. But if I'd like to have the ability to end up with the result I want, even if I can't quite deliver it, which is maybe not an authentic thing or not, but I'm still looking forward to those kinds of things. But I think across the board, I mean, even with story stuff, I'm a little skeptical on, because like soon you can already chat GPT and have it give you story ideas and stuff. And I've definitely tried and I'm sure that's going to get better. I don't know. I think it'll help. I think it'll be helpful to spark new ideas, but I certainly don't want to, even if it could do a better job at me than writing, I don't know how much I'm going to want to just let it do it. Right. Because part of what makes what I do fun for me is, trying to find my own experience, infuse my own self into Blue and into his adventures. And so I'm hoping that there are some scary aspects to it, because I know how I can get lazy too. And I'm like, hopefully I don't start relying on AI to do that too, and I think if I do, it'll be obvious and people like, you're not going to resonate with it as much, but it's interesting times. It's all fun. It's all like powerful stuff. And the more powerful it is, you got to be responsible about it, which means you need to be aware of what you're doing and not just running into it and doing it. Like really think through what matters to you. Why do you want it to do this? And why do you want it to do that? And is that a reason that you connect with as a human being or not,
Right. Yeah, it's a cool way of looking at it. And I like the idea that came through there about you being able to be more like a director with AI. Like your director is not the director is a very valuable person in a movie. It's not, they're not just sitting there in a chair and getting everyone to do their work for them. They are a very crucial part of it. And if you can use AI or some tools in machine learning to help you direct more of your thing and be able to create more in that way, then I think it'd be very, very useful tool. And not like, as you said, not like you're necessarily going to say, hey AI, I'm tired today, can you make my next episode for me?
Right.
But like, can you go clean up my mocap that I did yesterday, or can you give me a little group of people milling around in the background there, or well, it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. I'm cautiously excited about it as well.
Awesome.
And just who knows? I don't think anyone gets to predict where it's going to go. But in being able to empower, like that, I like your spirit of being able to empower people, being able to bring people together. That's what a lot of what I'm hearing from what you're saying. And I think that the person that asked the question earlier on got like a most amazing answer through all the way through. How do you ideate? How do you build teams? How do you get people together? How do you be able to do more than one person could do with people, with technology? It's inspiring to me to see what you do, what you can accomplish. And I think we're seeing this new generation of content creators, like people who had access to to handy cams, to handheld cameras that were affordable. They were suddenly able to make movies and try and play with that. Now I feel like people are able to do the same with visual effects, which we had to work really hard to be able to do before, and you still do and will, but
Yeah.
empowering more people to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really just comes back down to like ideas, and I mean, even look at like, it's a funny example of Iron Man and Jarvis, like at the end of the day, that does all this crazy stuff, but he's the one going, here's what I want. I need this suit or I need this thing. And that's really going to be the relationship, I think. And it comes down to, do you have something to make, something to say, something to create? And even if it's just for yourself, and it's not for some audience or for some successful thing. It's like you want to foster that aspect of yourself, things that matter to you, making things that matter to you. And then AI is just going to play a role in facilitating that stuff and make it so that something that's typically out of grasp, it's now like in your grasp in some ways. And we'll just further continue on that thing. But at the one thing that's consistent is you still need something to make. If you're out running around just using AI to make stuff because you can, that's cool too. It's fun, but it's like playing with something versus actually like, making something. For me, there's a big difference there. I'm doing a bad job of articulating it, but being driven to make something that matters emotionally versus just kind of like intellectually, this is cool, I can do this. And I do that too, but at the end of the day, it's like I don't get the same satisfaction. And it's hard to do stuff, even with all the help of all this technology. All the hard stuff is still hard, which is how do you tell a story? For me, it's like how to tell a story, how to act, how to direct, cinematography, all things that I'm learning constantly. It's not stuff I learned, in any profession. Somewhat cinematography and VFX, you got a good grasp on, but directing you kind of pick up because you're watching it, but when you go to actually do it, it's different, and especially acting, you can watch it and you can criticize people who do it badly, but it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So I'm trying to get better at all those sort of analog things in some ways, because the technology is like, shit, I can now do this. Well, do I have something to say? And how can I express myself through these characters authentically? And I'm not there. I mean, the early Xanadu episodes for me were kind of okay, me learning, but I think the next set of Xanadu episodes, hopefully we'll see better performances from Blue, better stories, more authentic, drawing more from my own personal experience and stuff. That's kind of the path I'm on. And I'm excited about AI helping with all that stuff, but really the excitement for me is that I'm achieving that sort of thought process in myself as a creator, as a creative person. And we'll see how things come out.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it, and I love the spirit of what you're saying in great art being something that's worth expressing, something that you feel and you want to give to the world, which a machine is it's hard for a machine to do that. It might be able to help you with bits of the delivery, but it's very easy for it to make a lot of tech demos, and those kinds of things are fine, but usually art is something that touches your heart, and that usually comes from a person expressing something directly, whether it's a painting or a movie or a song. It's normally coming straight from that person through something, and I feel like that you've accomplished that with Blue, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, awesome.
Is there anything else that you want to share with people? Any places
Um,
they can follow you, or
I did mention the nouns.wtf. If you go, there's a path, I wish I had it off the top of my head, where you can go to the proposals, and the Xanadu proposal is 135. I think it's kind of a fun thing to look at because it's literally what I put on the blockchain and that they read and saw. And the first clip is the video of Blue. So it's kind of fun, I think, fun thread to pull on or to go investigate. Otherwise, let's see. I haven't done anything. I haven't really made anything in the last year, so there's not much to share. And there will be soon. So like I guess if you want to follow some of the nouns episode stuff that I'm going to start publishing in the next few weeks. I mean, there's a few discords that I'm going to do that on, and I'm starting a Xanadu discord, but I don't have all that stuff with me. Maybe I can pass it to you guys once there's like,
Yep.
okay, here's a couple links if you're interested. And I'll also be tweeting stuff from my blue Twitter account, which is, I think, PWN Elon. But those are probably the best places to see stuff once I start pumping it out.
Great. Well, yeah, definitely we'll share that with the community through our channels whenever you want us to. And maybe we can do another session sometime and do a highlight. And yeah, however we can help you share what you're doing, very happy to do it.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that. Jackie was asking me a quick question. Should I throw that out there?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
somebody
she was
is
saying,
asking, how can somebody apply to help you in the future? Yeah, that one.
and learn themselves to improve on the go. What would be the answer to that? Honestly, LinkedIn is the place that my one social media portal when it comes to like work and artists and working with people. ArtStation to some small degree, but LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to me, hit me on LinkedIn. I think it's just under Cory Strassburger, and that's like the best place to get in touch with me. And that's also where I post, like if I'm looking for somebody for various people for stuff, I'll post on LinkedIn also. So that's kind of like the avenue I would go for that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate you sharing your time and your process and your approach to creating and the whole kit and caboodle. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, man. It was fun reminiscing too about some of the old school stuff. I love that. So awesome chatting, Ed. And yeah, until next time, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything you've done to help and the community and encourage this art form and for us as a school. Look forward to having you back sometime soon.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good.
Thanks, Cory.
Yep.
A big thanks to our listeners tonight as well. Thank you all for being here and sharing this time and for asking questions. And we look forward to seeing you again in another 2 weeks. We will have another episode of the CG Pro podcast. We have two people from Pixamondo. So look forward to that. And we've been CG Pro. You can follow us at becomecgpro.com or in our Facebook group. And we will see you all soon. Have a good evening, everybody.